Today, it's hard to find someone who hasn't heard of Counter-Strike. This iconic game series has been giving gamers unforgettable emotions for over 25 years. Back in 1999, CS 1.0 won the hearts of players by offering competitive gameplay instead of the usual single-player experience. Its success was reinforced by impressive graphics for its time and a variety of maps with different playstyles. It's hard to argue that CS 1.6 is a legendary game that will continue to evoke nostalgia in millions of players. CS:GO held top online player rankings for a decade, while CS2, being relatively new, quickly attracted millions of fans from its predecessor. But there's another important part of the series: Counter-Strike Source. Why didn't this game achieve the same success as its predecessor and successor? What is happening with it now, especially in the context of the HVH scene? Let's figure it out. Enjoy the video. Though, hold on a second. Since Valve has long since stopped supporting CSS, the game contains critical vulnerabilities, which we'll discuss later in the video. Playing on community servers carries potential security risks for your computer. Please be mindful of protecting your data. And now, certainly do enjoy the video. The fate of CS Source, which was released in 2004, was complicated and controversial. When creating a new installment of the popular shooter, Valve took on a huge responsibility. But instead of listening to the CS 1.6 fan community, they chose their own path. The result was a game built on a revolutionary new engine with improved graphics and physics, but one that was unappealing to its audience. At the time of its release in 2004, CS Source required high-end PCs, and its mechanics felt unfamiliar and inconvenient compared to the polished gameplay of CS 1.6. Why switch to a completely different game where you'd have to relearn everything? The rise of esports made things even worse. Between 2003 and 2004, small LAN tournaments began evolving into serious esports organizations like ESWC and CPL Europe, offering large cash prizes. CS 1.6 became the industry's flagship, pushing Quake aside. In this environment, Valve's attempts to promote Source in both casual and competitive gaming failed. Ultimately, Valve's efforts were met with resistance from the esports community and players with weaker PCs. Also, the free-to-play model wasn't common back then. CSS was a paid game, and only those willing to buy it could play. There was no economic incentive like CS:GO's weapon skins. It seemed like CS Source's story would end there, if not for Valve's persistence. Constant updates gradually improved the game. Version 28 to 34 represent the pre-Orange Box era, version 35+, before major Source engine updates. The game had a longer time to kill since hit registration was less precise than in later versions. Despite its improvements, CSS didn't gain popularity due to its core mechanics. By that time, gamers had upgraded their PCs and were enjoying numerous mods: Zombie Mod, Warcraft 3 mod, and many others. The game became a kind of game-as-a-service thanks to its modding tools and high-quality voice chat support. Players weren't chasing skill-based gameplay. They played mods and fought off zombies instead. This split the CS community into those who wanted competitive play and those who sought fun and new experiences. Valve did not make changes to CSS v34 for a long time until they moved on to developing a new game. By 2011, CS 1.6 had become outdated, while CSS remained a niche title. Valve recognized the risk of losing market share and used Source fans to test their future project. Utilizing the Source audience, which was no longer generating revenue, for testing the upcoming game seemed like a logical decision. After Source, Valve focused on creating CS:GO, attracting the esports community through major investments and tournament support, which, by the way, led to the creation of majors. However, fans of mods and unconventional gameplay didn't care about this. They remained loyal to Source. The only thing that could shake CSS's position among an audience indifferent to game mechanics was the introduction of skins and the trading system. Paid skins turned out to be a brilliant idea. Ultimately, CS Source couldn't replicate the legendary success of CS 1.6, either among players or in the emerging esports market. However, it didn't become just a shadow of its predecessor, but rather a shining star that managed to attract a new audience to the already outdated shooter mechanics. While Source was carving out its niche, the gaming community saw a rise in experimentation with cheats. And now, it's time to talk about the main topic of our channel, which is HVH. Not everyone knows that CS Source had two versions that split the community, the Steam version and a pirated v34 version, the latter being the most popular. Many consider CSS v34 one of the most stable and comfortable versions, both in terms of shooting and movement. Strafing felt much easier than in other versions. Even today, the community supports v34, providing stability and fresh content. A custom client was even developed, featuring improvements, optimizations, new features, and an inventory system with skins, something the Steam version lacks. Regarding cheats, in the Steam version, they either lack HVH functionality or offer only basic features. Thus, HVH in the Steam version never really existed. This difference became the foundation of what we'll explore next. When CS Source first came out, the HVH culture was not yet developed. No one could have imagined that this phenomenon would become popular in the future. As the game's player base grew, it began to attract the attention of the cheating community. People became interested in exploring the game engine and finding flaws they could exploit for their own benefit. This led to the creation of the first cheats, which had only a minimal set of features. For example, early aimbots lacked even silent aim, let alone hitbox selection. There was only head aim. ESP was quite basic, showing only nicknames and boxes indicating enemy positions. At that time, Valve did not have official servers. Everything was played on community-run servers. Cheaters faced two problems. The gameplay against legit players was too boring, and they were constantly getting banned by server admins. Because of this, cheaters gradually started playing 1v1 matches against each other. This led to the birth of the first, albeit small, CSS cheating community and the creation of HVH servers. Advanced cheat features did not yet exist. Instead, the basics were used: aimbot, ESP, bunny hop, and NoSpread with no recoil. Over time, cheats gained popularity. Players engaged in the classic NoSpread HVH battles on maps like AIM AG Texture 2 and AWP Lego 2. The stagnation of cheat functionality in CSS lasted until about 2013. Around that time, cheats gained features like anti-aim and fake lag. Competition was fierce. Each cheat had unique functions, and open source cheats were practically non-existent. Some of the earliest cheats in this field included Icaros, Paranoia, and Insomnia. Soon, cheat development progressed rapidly, and even in 2025, developers continue to update their products. When comparing basic features like aimbots to older games in the series, the differences seem minimal. The core mechanics remain the same. However, what truly sets CS Source apart today is that cheats appear to have reached their peak in terms of exploits. At this point, cheats in CSS seem to have taken advantage of every possible exploit, many of which rely on tick-based shifting. With each game tick, the client creates and sends a network packet to the server, recording your actions, where you're looking, where you're moving, whether you're crouched, fired a shot, pressed reload, etc. The server logic allows for the possibility that the client may not send data for a specific tick immediately, but instead send it later along with future ticks, without it being considered illegitimate. This kind of manipulation is known as tick-based shifting. For example, fake lag is an exploit that occurs because the client restricts packet sending but not packet creation. Double tap works by pre-restricting the sending of, say, 15 ticks. These charged 15 ticks allow the player to jump into the future, sending all stored ticks at once when firing, effectively allowing for an almost instant second shot. Several exploits work on this principle. The first one is rapid fire, increases the fire rate of any weapon, allowing an entire magazine to be emptied in seconds, even with a knife. This exploit was also present in early CSGO and CS2. A slightly limited version of it is double tap, which we just discussed. Next up, instant reload, which skips the reload animation, making reloads instantaneous. We should also mention about the instant weapon switch, which allows players to switch weapons without playing the draw/deploy animation, enabling immediate firing after switching. Another interesting feature is air stuck. It lets players freeze mid-air while still being able to shoot. It works by sending invalid position data to the server, preventing movement updates. While this exploit also existed in CSGO, it was patched first via plugins on community servers and later by developers. Speedhack is yet another interesting exploit. It enables extremely fast movement through client-side manipulation. While a similar bug existed in CSGO, developers quickly patched it. The exploit works by sending multiple movement commands instead of just one. Teleport is essentially an enhanced speed hack, instantly moving the player by spamming a large number of movement packets. CS2 also had a teleport exploit, but its implementation was significantly different. At the time, the game lacked most server-side validation checks, allowing data with modified speed and various other parameters to be accepted. Like in CS2, CS Source also has NoSpread, which completely removes bullet spread on any server that doesn't block it with a plugin. In essence, bullet spread determines how many degrees a shot deviates along the pitch and yaw axes. This spread is predetermined and calculated using a function that generates random spread values, of which there are 255 possible values. By running a script that checks all 255 values, the lowest possible deviation can be identified. In CSS, the minimum spread occurs at random seed 33. The client then modifies the server packet to send a random spread value of random seed 32, which the server increases by 1, resulting in minimal bullet deviation in pitch and yaw axes. But it can go even further. By analyzing the server code, cheats can predict the exact bullet spread and automatically adjust the crosshair by the same offset. For example, if the server calculates that a bullet will deviate by 5 degrees on the pitch axis and 2 degrees on the yaw axis, the cheat adjusts the aim by those exact amounts in the opposite direction, effectively nullifying the spread and ensuring perfect accuracy. In modern multiplayer games, such exploits are nearly impossible. Servers rigorously validate player actions and restrict unauthorized modifications. We actually made an entire video covering this topic, which we highly recommend watching. The only real difference between exploits in this version of the game and those in newer Source 2-based successors is their implementation. While Valve can still patch vulnerabilities in current games, in CSS, these exploits will remain forever. But beyond these subtle gameplay manipulations, there are even more serious flaws in the game. Some major exploits grant immunity from bans and even allow for a ghost mode effect. Various methods for crashing servers or causing lag for other players pale in comparison to the fact that the game allows viruses to be loaded through sprays. A player with administrator rights can create a plugin containing a virus and rename it as a custom spray. When the server loads this file, the player, using their admin privileges, can move the virus into the mod folder, source mod, effectively gaining full control over the server. Valve has long since stopped supporting CS Source. This means that critical exploits and zero-day vulnerabilities will almost certainly remain in the game forever. We want to warn you that there is a theoretical risk of encountering a virus in this game, including ones capable of executing remote code. The purpose of this video is to inform you about a game that many have overlooked, not to encourage you to play it. We are simply sharing this information and urging you to be cautious. Now let's talk about anti-aims, which are called desync here, an interesting technical aspect related to how the game processes data transmission between the server and the client. This is largely based on the fake lag mechanism. Fake lag in CSS works using the networking mechanics of the source engine. They artificially delay the sending of user commands to the server, creating a lag effect. When a player uses fake lag, their client does not send updated user commands to the server. The server continues to assume that the player is at the last recorded position, but in reality, their client moves further. When the client finally sends the accumulated commands, the server processes them instantly, teleporting the player's model to the new position. Unlike actual lag, this is a controlled delay that depends on the server's tick rate, usually 66 or 100 ticks per second in CSS. The way anti-aims work is as follows. We send the server information about our head angle, which leads to a change in the LBY, which is short for lower body yaw. But the server never transmits this information to other players. This is where the desynchronization between hitboxes and the player model comes from. If this information were constantly transmitted, this function would not exist. That's why desync only works with LBY, since the head angle cannot be faked. There is a term called clamping the angle, meaning it gets locked in place. In anti-aims, a 3-second timer usually triggers, after which the LBY gets aligned with the head angle, causing the difference between them, the delta, to disappear. This is what removes the desync. To restore it, you either have to wait 3 seconds or move. Whether this situation occurs depends on how exactly desync is implemented. Imagine an example. Our current angle is 0. The fake lag is set to 5 ticks. From the first to the fourth tick, we send an angle of 180. On the fifth tick, we send the angle needed for desync, for example 140. Then, at the moment when fake lag turns off between the fifth tick and the start of a new cycle, we send an angle of -150. This is the angle that the other players on the server will see. With this approach, no mystical clamping or freezing will occur. By the way, just like in CSGO, there are also untrusted anti-aims here. The anti-aim angle is not controlled by the server or the engine, allowing it to go beyond normal limitations. You can trick the game and create a fake pitch. Our actual model will be looking down, but for everyone else, it will appear as if we are looking up. Now, let's look at one of the key differences in HVH functionality between different game versions. In CSS, the ability to fake duck is a game feature that can be used even without cheats. The reason is that the engine does not account for an intermediate position between crouching and standing. When a player crouches or stands up, the animation occurs with a delay. Until the camera height, eye position, reaches the intended value, the animation does not complete. This means there is a desynchronization between the camera position and the player's height in the game. For example, if you are fully crouched, the values are ducking equals false, ducked equals true. When you start standing up, these variables remain unchanged until your camera height updates. If you release the crouch key before fully standing up and press it again, you remain in a crouched state, but can shoot from a higher position. Players noticed this flaw and automated it, creating the well-known fake duck. Backtrack in CS works due to lag compensation, a mechanism that allows the server to account for the time difference between a player's shot and the opponent's actual position at that moment. When a player fires, the server uses past positions of the opponent, lag compensation, to determine whether the shot hit. These positions are stored in history, typically up to 200 milliseconds back, and are used by the server to calculate hits. Simply put, we shoot at an enemy in the past. In CSS, Backtrack works as follows. The server can rewind an opponent's position back by 25 ticks. A tick is a unit of time in Source games, dependent on the server's tick rate. At a standard tick rate of 66, 25 ticks of Backtrack roughly equals 378 milliseconds. This means that even if an opponent has already moved on the player's screen, the server can account for their past position and register the kill. In CSS and early CSGO, there was no strict latency limit. The server relied solely on client data. This allowed for much larger backtrack values. The fake ping feature in Source artificially increases latency, making the server think the player has a high ping. This increases the available window for backtracking, allowing enemies to be rewound further back, up to 1 second, even though this delay is not real. A crucial part of the game is stamina. In CS2 and CSGO, stamina mechanics affect movement speed after jumping. When a player jumps, their stamina decreases, leading to a gradual slowdown with each subsequent jump until stamina recovers. In Source, stamina works differently. It does not reduce speed during consecutive jumps, but only slows the player if they start walking after jumping. In CSGO and CS2, stamina directly affects jump speed, whereas in Source, it only influences the transition from jumping to normal movement. Interestingly, cheat functionality from CSGO can be fully implemented in CSS. The engine technically allows for these same ideas to be adapted to the game's mechanics. It's funny, but there are no paid cheats in Source. They are either free and publicly available, or they are private and given only to trusted people. The HVH community itself is small. Currently, about 600 people sometimes play HVH in CSS. Most people know each other, and everyone is quite friendly. The toxicity seen in HVH CSGO is simply not present here. Many players independently study the technical aspects of the game, port maps, improve cheats, and even arrange when they will play in advance. The most popular mode is matchmaking with limited exploits, and people often play 2v2 because the overall online player count isn't always large. For this reason, there are only a few familiar public servers from the older games in the series. People play on mixed maps, original CSS maps, Dust, Dust 2, and those ported from CSGO. The original maps don't have the same wallbangs as in CS2, as these are completely different versions of game engines using incompatible materials. The community has ported maps from CSGO with maximum accuracy, so the wallbangs are virtually identical. Thus, CSS v34 has a unique community made up of enthusiasts. The game itself offers a unique experience and opportunities that are unavailable in the later games in the series. Source gives players the freedom to use mechanics that were fixed in CSGO and CS2. Despite the game being 20 years old, the community actively supports the old version, creating client mods and adding new features. It's quite an interesting gaming experience that can't be compared to HVH in CS2 and CSGO. In our team, there are people who started their journey with this game, and someday we will nostalgically return to it. Thank you for watching. This has been the Never Lose team. Stay tuned for more insights in our upcoming videos.